Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Dom Orletta, the Payments Compliance Account Manager at Vixio, based in London. I'm joined with Garvit Kalaraman, one of our senior analysts, and Adam Parkinson, one of our editors here at Vixio. So just a bit of background in case you don't know who we are. Vixio is a RegTech company. We are a trusted source of independent regulatory intelligence for compliance, strategy, regulatory and legal professionals to stay on top of your regulatory changes. We deliver comprehensive, time-sensitive and actionable intelligence on payments and gambling compliance, covering more than 180 jurisdictions across the globe and organized by product and service types. A bit about what we're going to be doing today. So in today's webinar, we'll be taking a deeper dive into European enforcements to help give you a visibility of where and what the regulators are keen to focus on. To set the scene, we will run through why enforcements and why we track some of these actions. I'll also then take you through how you can start to use enforcements tracking within our horizon scanning tool. There will also be some input from Adam and Garvit along the way, who will help us analyze recent trends, updates regarding some of our recent enforcement outlook, and they'll be giving you an overview of how compliance teams can prepare and use this information to activate change. We'll also have some time at the end to run through some questions, so please do ask away if you've got anything you'd like us to answer. So to set us off then, Garvit, I guess it'd be good to understand from your perspective why enforcements, sort of why we built this feature to sort of expand our horizon scanning capabilities.
Thank you so much, Tom. So basically, over the past few years, there have been tremendous developments and innovations in the banking and payment industries. Now, concurrent to these developments, what we have is that the regulation is also becoming more and more complex. So while it is really important for businesses to keep abreast of the regulations, businesses also would want to know, like, what if they're non-compliant? So that's where Vixio's enforcement tracking tool comes in. So our tracker on horizon scanning basically covers enforcement actions by the regulatory authorities in the UK, EU, and we cover different entities, including banks, payments institutions, and crypto firms. So the key area of focus for our coverage is basically in four specialisms. First one being anti-money laundering. Then we have data protection. After that, we have business misconduct, and then we have competition and antitrust. So yeah, that's why enforcements.
Brilliant. Thank you, Garvit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen and just show in a second how you can start to track and sort of look at enforcements from a forward-looking view. So part of what we'll do later on, we'll run through some of the history and some of the things of what's happened in the past few months around enforcements, just to kind of give you a visibility of maybe some of the things to look at. But what we want to do is just show you where within our horizon scanning tool, you can start to look forward and give you that view of upcoming sort of enforcement actions, so you're fully aware of what's happening across the European landscape. So hopefully you'll see my screen. I'm sharing the Vixio Payments Compliance platform. If we come into horizon scanning, just wait for that to load. You'll see, as always, our regulatory development tracker. So you'll see all regulatory updates across the broad spectrum of the payments landscape. But what we're going to focus on today is enforcement. So just as an example for our purposes, we're going to cover Western Europe and Central and Eastern Europe as a jurisdiction. And then the slight change in terms of now how you'll be able to do enforcement actions, you can scroll down, click on enforcement. This will give you visibility of financial penalties, license revocations, license suspensions, remedial action, restrictive orders, and warnings. You can also, if you would like to, go a layer deeper. And if you want to be more specific to your sort of business type or enforcements of interest, then again, you can look at bank enforcement, e-money institutions, anything affecting investment firms or payment institutions. So for the purpose of today's demonstration, we will just cover the enforcements here. And then what we start to recommend customers to do, and something I champion quite a lot in my calls with clients, is setting up watch lists. So the valuable piece of doing this is we're going to start to alert you on a daily basis of these enforcement actions to bring these front of mind, save you having to scour multiple websites, and you can then start to make sure that these are front and center, being alerted to you so you know what's happening on the payments landscape. So set your watch lists, save your filters, and then save to watch list. So just for demo purposes, we will call this Europe. That's not right. Europe enforcement. What that's triggered is a day alert alerting you to, like I said, upcoming European enforcement actions. In terms of the content you'll see, it's down the left-hand side within your tracker. You've also now set filters to see in correspondence of the newest at the top. You'll see enforcement actions and updates from a regulator or authority. So what we have done is we've selected a couple from some recent sort of updates that Adam and Garvit are going to run through. I think actually Garvit, you're going to run through a couple of these that we've picked out specifically. So if I start on this one from the Bank of Lithuania, I don't know if you want to build some context and maybe give some idea around of why we've selected this one as one to highlight today.
Yeah. So basically, as you can see, on March 12, 2024, the Bank of Lithuania fined Secure Nordic Payment 210,000 euros for anti-money laundering failures. So you can see that in terms of coverage, in the update itself, we have named the entity, we have specified the fine size, and then you can also see that we have actually specified the exact violation that has occurred. And to top that, we have also referred to the legal provision that has been violated. And if you take a look at the right-hand side of the page, you can see we have this different specialism. We got anti-money laundering. Of course, the fine is for anti-money laundering. Then we have a financial penalty because this is certainly a fine. And then the interesting thing is that we also highlight what kind of institution that is. So Secure Nordic Payment is here any money institution. So yeah.
It's really interesting. Thank you. In terms of the other one we wanted to share was from the BaFin. So, I mean, again, is there anything further you want to add or maybe highlight, again, why this is something important that's come out?
So this is certainly an interesting one because you can see that Germany's Financial Supervisory Authority, they fined N26 Bank AG 9.2 million euros. And that's basically just for delaying submission of their anti-money laundering reports. So this is certainly a hefty fine. And then you can see that Germany doesn't let go of any miscreants because even if it's a small violation, you can get fined pretty heavily, as you can see with the 9.2 million euro fine.
Thank you. So just going to stop sharing my screen there. I guess in terms of, from a platform perspective, that's kind of what we want to highlight in terms of maybe things that you could use to start looking forward. So thank you, Garvit, for giving us a short run through on some of those kind of more key updates. And obviously, please utilize the platform to start to build maybe some repository of some of these enforcements, just to help you kind of track and build an idea of maybe for future reference, if something comes out, how that may give you a knock-on effect moving forward. I guess on that point, and again, think of how my customers will utilize this, ensuring that the watch lists are set up, ensuring that they've got that key visibility of that European outlook is something we strive to do. So once come off this webinar today and make sure that drop into Horizon Scanning, set up your filters and your watch list for the things that are important to you, and then moving forward, you won't miss out on anything pertaining to payments businesses from an enforcement perspective. So moving on to the sort of segueing into the next part, I guess is to both of you really, in terms of the enforcement outlook that you guys obviously are going to be discussing today. So and that come from a lot of the Horizon Scanning updates and jurisdictional sort of coverage that we do. So I don't know, I think Adam, are you due to start? Have you got things you want to discuss on terms of the outlook? And how that sort of looks from the past 6 months.
So I think what we'll do is Gargot will run us through some of the details that were thrown up by the outlook, and I'll kind of talk about the themes. So in terms of the report itself, it was based on the first 6 months of this year, and it was built entirely using the enforcement tracking aspect of Horizon Scanning. Gargot did a great job of pulling out all the data points, and we used that as a basis of a report to look into what regulators are prioritising and why, and what we think is going to happen moving forward. So yeah, it was a pretty busy time, right, Gargot?
Yeah, certainly. So using our Horizon Scanning tool, we actually tracked 67 enforcement actions in total for the first half of 2024. And not so surprisingly, that basically includes 80% of them as financial penalties. And the remainder, you can say, include license revocations, suspensions, warnings, and orders to rectify the mistake. Now, if we talk about how we have prepared this outlook. So we have, of course, used our enforcement tracking tool, but we have divided the data that we could get from that into 5 bases. So we got monthly divisions, we got divisions by type of violation that has occurred or the type of breach. Then we got division by the jurisdiction. And after that, we got division by the actual type of enforcement action. Like, is it a fine or is it a warning, etc.? And then interestingly, we have also discovered basically that there are different entities that have been fined. So yeah, that's 5 bases. Handing over to you, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the jurisdictions. It's quite an interesting area. We found that there was plenty of activity across the board, but interestingly, Eastern Europe was quite a hotbed. So Hungary, the Czech Republic, Romania, but the standout jurisdiction was Lithuania, which had 12 of the 67 enforcement, so a decent proportion. 8 of those enforcements were fines, 7 were for money laundering, which is something that we'll touch on, I think, later. But I think what's going on there is that the Eastern European jurisdictions are looking to establish that they are good places to do business, where the rule of law pertains. It's not a place to go get a license and do whatever you want, and that's reflected in the activity. Western Europe, similarly, plenty going on. The UK, Germany as well, both handed out a significant number of fines, and big fines as well. There were 4 fines in Germany, I think, totaling about 21 million euros. So regulators across the board are pretty active, and the areas that they're looking at, mentioned money laundering, business misconduct was the other one. So these are the areas that regulators have in mind and are acting on at the moment.
Sounds good. So that basically leads us into the type of violations that have occurred. So unsurprisingly, the key focus of regulators for the first half this year has been anti-money laundering. And there have been a total of 36 enforcement actions for AML violations, while 29 of them have been fines. So that's basically half of the total enforcement actions that we have got. So, Adam, any context on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, anti-money laundering is always going to be a top of mind, a subject area for regulators and for governments as well. The nature of it means that if you're not on top of money laundering, you've got serious bad actors, organised crime, terrorists. So people are going to be thinking about it. I think specifically this year, the EU has been pretty active in this area, revising and reforming its regulations. And probably the most significant step is the foundation of the Anti-Money Laundering Authority, which is going to be based in Frankfurt. And I think what we're seeing within the bloc itself is national regulators demonstrating that they're engaging with that push to clamp down on money laundering, show that their jurisdictions are on top of it, which is why there's kind of generally been a lot of activity in that area.
So, just touching on some key points for AML violations. So, the Czech Republic, Germany, and Lithuania, these 3 jurisdictions, they actually accounted for 2/3 of enforcement actions for AML violations in the first half of this year. And now, moving on from AML, so the second most enforced violation was basically business misconduct. And there have been a total of 19 enforcement actions, of which 15 have been fines. So, Adam, anything on that?
Yeah, again, business misconduct's a big topic. regulators are always going to be looking at it. I think at the moment there's generally a sense that customer protection safeguarding is pretty high up the agenda. The main regulation that's got a particularly high profile is the consumer duty in the UK. The FCA is continuing to reiterate the importance of it and refine its messaging, and it's going to keep pushing at it. I think the UK regulator and regulators across the region are not going to let it go. So I think payments firms need to keep in mind that they need to get their consumer protections in good order, because otherwise enforcement's coming.
Sounds good. So like just talking a bit about a couple of notable examples from the UK. So UK's FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, they fined HSBC a total of £6.28 million. And that was basically for failing to properly assist customers in financial difficulties. And there was another fine issued by the FCA, and that was basically a £3.5 million fine to CBPL. And that was for repeatedly breaching the requirement to not offer their services to high-risk customers. So yeah, you can see UK is totally clamping down on business misconduct, and with, of course, hefty fines. Yeah.
Definitely a key priority when I talk to clients. Seems to be focused, as I'm sure is not a surprise.
Now, like if we move on to the third type of violation that we have discovered. So there have been a total of 9 breaches of data protection obligations, but most of them have occurred in Romania, Spain, and Sweden. For instance, Spain's AEPD, and that's their data protection authority, they fined CaixaBank 1.2 million euros and Spain Financial Services a fine of 360,000 euros for GDPR violations. Now, if we move a bit north, we got Netherlands. So the Netherlands Data Protection Authority, they fined International Card Services a total of 150,000 euros for just failing to properly conduct their internal assessment regarding data protection. And that's according to the GDPR. And if we move on to the fourth specialism that we have covered, so that's a surprising one. So in Poland, the Competition and Antitrust Authority, they actually issued the largest single penalty in the first half of 2024. And the penalty was issued to PayPal. The fine size was 25 million euros. So PayPal was found to have engaged in unfair business practices. So you can see that the Polish regulator has actually issued a really, really big fine for that. Now, moving on from the type of violations that have occurred, we also discovered that there are different kinds of entities that have been fined. So that's another one of our bases. Now, if we look at the data that we have gathered, we can see that there have been as many as 36 enforcement actions. So that's mostly half of what we have covered. So majority of them have been issued to banks, and that includes really high-profile ones. So that's certainly to be expected that banks are in the firing line, because banks and, of course, credit lending institutions, they're more prevalent in the UK and in the EU, and they're obviously large in number as compared to your payments institutions and e-money institutions. But however, I would certainly like to point that banks and credit lending institutions are not the only perpetrators. So there have been crypto firms that have been fined. For example, in the Czech Republic, there have been a total of 7 fines that have been issued to crypto firms, mostly for anti-money laundering violations. Similarly, in Lithuania's FNTT, they fined Payer a total of 9.2 million euros, again, for anti-money laundering issues. Now, other than crypto firms and banks, we also track that payments and e-money institutions have also come under firing line. And from our data, they actually accounted for 20% of the enforcement actions that we covered. For instance, you can see that in Lithuania, the Bank of Lithuania has revoked the licenses for Majestic Financial and NeoCard, and that's for serious anti-money laundering failings. Other than that, in Germany, you can see that the Federal Financial Supervisory Authority, or as we like to call it, the BaFin, has issued a 6.5 million fine to Solaris for late submission of suspicious activity reports. So yeah, you can certainly see different entities are being fined for different reasons. So, yeah. Adam, do you want to talk about like the themes, key themes?
Yeah. So just kind of wrapping it up, I guess the key themes that we drew out is the importance of anti-money laundering protections. Regulators have been pretty active in that area, so that's something that firms need to be considering pretty closely. Another one is the prevalence of fines. 80%-ish of the enforcements that we tracked in the first half of the year were financial penalties. So again, firms need to get everything in order, otherwise they're going to be hit with substantial fines. And a key point that we saw was regulators are active. They're out there probing, looking for violations, and they're coming down hard. And that's going to keep going, I reckon, because there's more big regulation coming in the EU. We're looking at DORA and MiCA at the end of this year, beginning of next year. So firms really need to make sure that they're looking at what's available in terms of, or what's out there in terms of compliance, which bringing things full circle is where the horizon scanning tool comes in, especially the enforcement tracking element of it. By using the watch list, by monitoring it closely, you can see what you need to be doing to stay out of the scope of all of these regulators who are pretty active and will remain so.
Thank you. I think it's really interesting. I think clear for me, just listening to you both there, it's not just one track, right? There's so much that, teams just need to be aware of and stay on top of. It's just, very, very busy time for compliance and regulatory teams. So no, thank you. It's both really, really interesting. Thank you for the coverage of that. I think I can see there's a couple of questions that we've got coming through. First one is, you mentioned that other than fines, regulators also resorted to other types of actions. Can you provide any brief insight on this? Garvit, I don't know if that's one. Would you want to take that one?
Yep, certainly. So I can say, yep, certainly there have been different kinds of enforcement actions, obviously other than fines as well. But I would like to raise a little caveat here. So it could certainly be the case that a single entity has been fined and it has also been issued a warning to take corrective action. Otherwise, the fine size could increase. So yeah, like if we just want to talk about raw numbers, so in the first half of this year, there have been a total of 6 warnings, and there have been 7 instances where the regulatory authorities have actually asked the entity to just basically take corrective action. And unsurprisingly, most of them have been for anti-money laundering failings. And other than that, if we talk about data, so a couple of licenses have been suspended and one of them has been revoked in the first half of this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question. Will I be able to track enforcement actions in the US? I probably can take that one. So currently, from a horizon scanning perspective, we have European coverage. We have got plans moving forward to expand that globally. So ideally looking in the next year, but it's US specifically, we'd anticipate it'd be for the first half of 2025. But currently, the enforcement that is trackable within horizon scanning is European focused. But yes, we're looking to expand that globally as we go into next year. But yeah, US looking more first half of next year. Good question. Another one, where crypto firms particularly targets of enforcement. I guess, Adam, you have an answer one. I could pass one to you.
Fair enough. Fair smack. Particularly, I'm not sure. I think it's about 14 of the 67 enforcements in the first half of the year that we tracked were crypto firms. So it's a decent proportion, it's 20%, something like that. There were enforcements in the Czech Republic. There was a big fine for payer that Garvit mentioned in Lithuania. So regulators are looking at crypto firms. I guess they're still a little uneasy with crypto and what those firms are doing and what they can be used for by the kind of bad actors that we talked about earlier. They were targeted for the same sort of things that we saw across the board. It was anti-money laundering failures and business misconduct. So I don't know that they were particularly targeted, but they were definitely on the radar. There's no doubt that, like any other payments firm and financial organisation, they need to be making sure that they're compliant because, you know, whether they're going to be targeted more than other firms, I don't know, but they are on regulators' radars.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot being looked at across different streams. But yeah, I think it's that's a good question as well. Think about it from a crypto perspective. I think that's all we've got time for in terms of questions. If we didn't get to answer any of the questions that you've posed, we'll seek to respond to them separately after the webinar. Obviously, look, thank you, Garvit. Thank you, Adam. That was really interesting, and thank you for obviously listening to us and joining onto the session. Jack, I'll pass back over to you.
Thank you to Dom, Garvit, and Adam, and of course, thank you to our audience for attending today's session. As mentioned at the start of the session, this webinar was recorded and a video will be sent to all attendees in the coming days. If you asked a question during the broadcast that was not answered, a member of the Vixio team will look to get back to you as soon as possible. Finally, if you have any questions about anything discussed in today's webinar or would like further information on Vixio, please email info@vixio.com or visit our website, vixio.com. Thank you.